Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Varshi Gupta, and she's an engineering director driving DevOps and product engineering initiatives. But it wasn't always that way, so I'm really interested to learn more about her journey to where she's at now, how public speaking has benefited her, and everything in between. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Varshi.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you today.
Wonderful. Because if you weren't, that'd be unfortunate. You're already here.
Definitely.
So I noticed from the bit of research I did on you that you got a degree in computer engineering. What was the motivation to get that degree?
Right. So ever since I was in high school and even before that, I have loved problem solving. So I'm a problem solver by nature. So I knew very early on that computers and computer engineering is something I wanted to get into. So I got my first computer back in fifth grade. So that was that time. Like now, kids are born with computers and mobile phones. But I got my first computer in fifth grade, and since then I've been programming. So I've been building websites in HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So that's how I started initially, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then I just knew that this is what I want to do in my life in future. And yeah, I went for computer engineering after my high school.
Are you from India, Varshi?
Yes, I'm back from India.
Okay, so from what I understand, to go to university and study a particular subject in India, you have to take a test, and based on the results of the test, that tells you what you're allowed to study. Is that true?
So there are multiple tests that happen in India for engineering. So then there is the Indian Institute of Technology. So you have the joint entrance examination there. Then you have National Institutes of Technology. So you have exams for those. You have all of the universities have their own private exams at times too. So based on how well you perform academically and based on how well you perform in these tests, you can get into one of these universities.
Okay, 'cause I remember I had a guest on a while back, and I think he wanted to do engineering, but he didn't get a high enough score on some tests, so he ended up doing, I think, molecular biology instead. And he
Interesting.
wasn't all that happy about it. And then I also had another guest who was from Egypt, and she was telling me about her father. He wanted to do engineering, but apparently he didn't get a high enough score on a test. He ended up doing architecture instead. So I
Mhm.
can't that amount of pressure to have to take this test to determine what you can study based on, and then that being kind of I guess the catalyst of what you do for the rest of your, I guess, your adult life. That must be a lot of, yeah, that must be a lot of pressure.
Yeah, no, I think so. Computer engineering is very popular in India. It was popular when I did it back then, as well as it's very popular right now too. So, as a discipline, it's something a lot of the people getting into engineering want to do in India, also because that's where a lot of the jobs are. So, people who do mechanical engineering at times also end up in computer engineering. So, that's why it might be a bit more tough to get into computer engineering. But there are a lot of private universities. There are a lot of ways to make it, even if you don't get into one of the bigger public universities.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah.
But I also saw that you got a master's. So what was the motivation to do that?
Right. So after my graduation in computer engineering, I worked for a couple of years for Accenture in Italian for Italian banks, so in financial sector. During that time, I started to realize the value of business in IT. So what I mean by that is, I started to realize that coding needs to have a purpose as well. You need to, when you're building software, you need to keep your users in mind. You need to keep a business purpose as well as a human purpose of that code in mind. So I got more interested in how can we figure out and find a purpose with the code that we write. And that was a catalyst in me trying to get a master's. I got a master's in information systems from State University of New York. It's a really good program, and I wanted to do a specific research internship with one of the professors there, Professor Sherman. So I had analyzed that even before I had applied. So I really knew that this is what I want to do, and he's really good into healthcare research, so healthcare IT. So that's how my path shaped. I knew I wanted to pursue some research opportunities under this professor. I wanted to learn more about the business of IT. So this degree was a perfect fit for me.
Wow, so you went from India to New York, man. That's a difference in that's a difference not only in culture but just in weather. You had to buy
And
a
now I
winter
live
coat.
in Canada. So in
Oh, good
India,
Lord.
yeah. So in
Yo,
India, I'm from Jaipur, Rajasthan, which is like a desert area. So easily above 40 or 50 degrees Celsius temperature. Then I'm now in Canada, which reaches minus 40 all the time. So I've done the entire spectrum of
good
weather.
Lord. God bless you. You got all the winter coats.
Yes. I have clothes for all sorts of weather.
Indeed,
My
indeed.
wardrobe's huge.
I'm sure it is. All right. So you did computer engineering, then you get a master's degree. But I thought you also did an MBA. So what was the motivation to do the MBA?
Right. So it was after my master's in information systems. I worked for a few years, 4 or 5 years in US. So I started in healthcare IT, and then I moved to AutoZone, which is e-commerce and retail in auto parts. So that's where my career grew from in engineering to more of the product management, technical product management, and I started realizing I needed a few more skills, especially around financing, accounting, people development, and product growth and product development. So that's where I started my executive MBA.
Yeah, yeah. This lady like school, man. When's the PhD coming?
I actually plan on doing it, but I think that would mostly be interest focused. So I want to do a PhD in psychology one day if I have the time for it. But let's see when that happens or if it happens.
Good Lord, wow. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, so now you have all these degrees. You're working in the field that you want to work in. I'm kind of curious with the job that you have currently. How did your previous jobs prepare you for the one that you're currently doing?
Right. So currently, I'm working as the engineering director for DevOps teams at Canonical. So these teams are building software that helps make IT operations easier. So in general, we see like a lot of the software or application code is shared, but the same is not true for operations code. That operations knowledge is typically with a system administrator or a SRE, and that's what we want to package and make available and share as open source. So that's my current role. In my past, I have all of the management and the business and the leadership training that I got through my different roles. So I've worked in multiple sectors, from pure software development to financial sectors to healthcare to e-commerce, and now in open source. So I have a large understanding of how diverse businesses operate their IT, what are their concerns, what sort of issues that they have to think about. So the security concerns for a healthcare industry might be entirely different to what banking needs, and it might be entirely different to what a IT company needs. So as you work into these different sectors, you start building that knowledge base up. Also, my career graph has been very interesting too. Like I'm at the core of it. I am an engineer. I identify myself as an engineer, as a problem solver, and those skills coupled with all of the knowledge that I now have being in leadership positions for so long, has just generally shaped up and helped me be in this role at AutoZone as well. Before I moved to my current role at Canonical, I was working as a technical product manager for the DevOps teams. So I helped shape the DevOps culture there, and that directly then aligned with what I'm doing right now.
When it comes to managing others, is that something that you always thought that you would do, or is it something that kind of presented itself and you took the opportunity?
Right. So I've been in leadership positions ever since I can remember. Like even in my school days or my university, I have been in different leadership positions. So that just comes naturally to me. Managing people. To be honest, I hadn't really thought that I would be managing people. At a certain point, I wanted to be more into architecture of solutions and solutions design. But then, as I started getting more into product management and starting getting more getting the chance to build business strategy and product strategy, I enjoyed that a lot more. I enjoy thinking about what sort of new solutions can we bring to the table, and people management is a part of it as well. I love building teams. I love growing people. I get I get a personal satisfaction when I see one of the persons reporting to me get achieve what they wanted to. So that's just something I've always enjoyed. But yes, technically, I wasn't really thinking of people management before, but now I really like it.
Wonderful. And I'm glad there are people out there like you that like that type of work, Varshi, because
Mhm.
the idea of leading people, managing others makes my stomach hurt. Oh my goodness, people are nuts. And they bring all their problems sometimes, not sometimes,
Yeah.
all the time. They bring their problems to work. And now you got to deal with it as the leader of those people. But you know
Mhm.
what? If you like it, I like that you like it. So thank you. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. you
No, I
know,
think like you said, I am a problem solver, and if people come to me with a problem, that's just a challenge for me to help them get through it. But
wonderful.
yeah.
Wonderful. I'm glad you want to take on other people's challenges that have nothing to do with working in a lot of cases. But I'm wonderful. I'm glad for that. Thank you. When it comes to leading others, do you think a leader should have a leadership style, or should they lead based on how others want to be led?
I think it's important to have for a leader to have their own leadership style or their brand of leadership. Um, as at the core of it, as a leader, you should model what you would want to inculcate in your team. So you should lead by example. So that's how I model my leadership, is leading by example and servant leadership. So that's the leadership style that I resonate with a lot more. I think it's important as a leader to identify what is your brand, your personal brand, what are your values, what sort of performance and culture that you want to set into your team, and then model that behavior and uh, try and inculcating that behavior in your team as well.
Varshi, I've heard so many times this idea of leaders needing to be vulnerable to get the most out of their teams. What do you think about that?
I think what vulnerability does is it builds trust within your teams. So if you always have a facade in front of you, if you are always that prototype of a really strong leader, never being vulnerable or showing the real side to your team, the trust sometimes doesn't get built. So how I see it is the vulnerability, or sometimes actually discussing what you are really facing, helps your team understand where you're coming from much better and helps build that trust between you and your teams.
For the people who are listening or watching our conversation, Varshi, and they have aspirations to be leaders within their companies, what should they do to prepare to be one?
I think you should. Anybody can be a leader. So if whatever role you are in, you might be the most junior person on your team, but you can still be a leader. So leadership is not defined by a title. You don't need to be a CEO to be a leader of a company. In any role that you are in, you can find those leadership opportunities. How do you do that? You take ownership of what's assigned to you. You show proactiveness in your work. You show uh, a clear understanding of what you're doing and try to get to that clear understanding by yourself. You lead by example yourself. You as every person has their own a personal brand and their own set of values that they hold important. So make sure that you are showcasing those. work with your managers if you are in a more junior role to find those opportunities. In every company you have things like resource groups. You can always bring something new to the table. Make sure you're pitching ideas in a conversation or in a meeting. When you have a lot of people talking, try and contribute. Even if you're not able to contribute, you could just be proactive and assign yourself to be the meeting note taker. So things like those, see yourself as a leader. That's very important.
It's so interesting you mentioned the note taking, Varshi, because
Mhm.
I've listened to a number of podcasts and read articles about what are deemed non-promotable tasks, and note taking is one of them. At least is listed as one of those tasks. But you seem to think that note taking can be a way to show yourself as the leader of tomorrow. Why? So I mean, if that's not true, please correct me. But if that is true, why do you think some other people see it as something that isn't, I guess, doesn't benefit your career long term?
Um, I I personally don't believe that note taking doesn't benefit you long term. So the sense that I mentioned note taking was increasingly, as people and as companies, we are becoming more global. We are in my company itself, we have employees in over 70 countries or so. We cover all of the time zones, and at times it's not possible to have everyone in the room. So if somebody takes that initiative and takes those notes and makes sure that we have a record of what was said and what was the decision made in a meeting, that is crucial. Like, as human beings, we don't really remember things most of the times. After a few months, we tend to forget what happened and what was the decision taken. And that initiative of you showcasing that you are willing to do that, willing to take the grunt work and willing to take the notes which are helpful, which would be helpful later on. I think that just showcases leadership. So I do think increasingly writing and documentation is becoming very, very important. Um, and yeah, just note taking helps you refine your writing skills even further.
You know, when it comes down to it, it really does come down to perspective on how you see these things. When I was actually a connection that I have on LinkedIn, she wrote a whole article about these non-promotable tasks and why it might be a good idea to embrace a number of them to be seen as that leader. And then right afterwards, I sent that same article to another LinkedIn connection of mine who did a whole podcast episode on non-promotable tasks and why you shouldn't do them. One of them being note taking, and for that second LinkedIn connection, I guess her reasoning for not doing them is they're not going to help you in moving up within an organization, and they take time away from your actual job. So you're not going to have the time to actually be measured based on the work that you're supposed to be doing because you spent some of that time taking notes.
Right. So I think it depends on like what you mean by take notes as well. Do you mean that they are just doing that as a part of their regular job all the time? Or that's like there is a difference between being a productivity ninja and just taking notes and trying out the productivity apps and having task lists and then actually accomplishing something. But the note taking in the sense that you're capturing the essence of a meeting, or you're capturing what was discussed, and capturing the decisions made, so that people who might not be in that meeting, or even you later on, can refer back to it and identify what was talked about. I think that's absolutely important. At least in where I work, maybe if you are in an organization where you see each other all the time, where all of your companies is 100 people that you meet every day and you know everything, and do the same type of work all the time, maybe in that sense you don't note do a lot of note taking. But if you're working in a global company with remote or hybrid culture, then and you would be on vacation at times too, and you would appreciate that somebody took a note of all the meetings so that you can just refer back to it. So it's just like you said, it's a perspective on what people value.
Yeah, I think you're right. Also, I guess one thing I forgot to mention is that with the second LinkedIn connection that I sent the article to, the issue she often touts is that a lot of times especially with the note taking, it's not necessarily you taking the initiative to take the notes. It's someone asking you whether you can take the notes, and do you take the notes because you actually want to take the notes, or you take the notes because you feel compelled to say yes to the person who asked you to
Mm.
take the notes? And I guess when
Yeah.
it's the when it's the well, when it's the latter, I guess that second connection sees it as an issue.
Yeah, so I think in that case, you're not showcasing leadership, right? Like this question started with how can you showcase leadership? So you can find this is just an example of a small way to find an opportunity to showcase that. So that just it's doesn't have a lot of bars, or it doesn't require a deep understanding of anything. It's just something anybody can do, right? You can be proactive. So the idea here is to be more proactive, to be uh, pushing yourself outside your box a little bit more. So that's the key idea that anybody can then implement.
Wonderful. Varshi, when I started this podcast, it was based on my own struggles working as an engineer and not being the best at presenting in front of audiences. That's to put it lightly. And actually, I was terrible at it, and I was terrible
Mhm.
at it for quite some time until I saw the benefit of getting better to do so. When
Mhm.
when it comes to the presentations or public speaking generally that you do, is that something you've always been good at? And if not, what did you do to get better at it?
I'm like you, Neil. I've never, an introvert. So exposing myself publicly in public speaking or on stages doesn't just come naturally to me all the time. So how I got better at it is, I don't know if you've heard about the three P's of public speaking and the three S's.
Mm,
So the three P's of public speaking are prepare, practice, and personalize or perform. And the three S's are structure, story, and self. So how I connect it is I didn't know about those early on, but I naturally just started following these steps. So whenever you're presenting or public speaking, one of the most important things you can do is to prepare. So you really need to understand who your audience is, what is something that you want them to take away from what you're presenting or talking about. So whenever you are having a lecture or a conference talk, try thinking about what is the one thing that you want your audience to take away, and craft your story around it. So that's the prepare aspect of it. Then practice. I think people estimate the importance of practice. Like they put in a lot of effort in making their slides look really good, put in a lot of effort in their story, but they don't really put in actually talk it out or actually practice it as much. So what I really like doing is practice in front of a mirror or and on a webcam. If you can find a friend and actually practice in front of them and get live feedback, that's pretty great as well. So try practice as much as you can, and try being yourself when you're practicing. So that's what it allows you to do. Like when you're practicing, you notice your ers and ahs and the filler words that you're speaking. You notice your expressions and how you're talking, and if there are certain words you're pronouncing wrong. So that all of that you can correct during the practice stage. And then finally, when you're performing or you're actually talking about it, a mistake that some people make is they just read through the slides. So your slides should just be a guide on there. You are the one presenting, you are the storyteller. So don't rely on your slides as much. You should be the one that the audience looks at, and the slides are just there as a visual aid. So those are the three things. I also like taking the unfamiliar out of the equation, because like I said, I am an introvert. And also I'm a type A personality. I plan quite a bit. So I like taking things like making sure there is an internet connection where you're speaking. And that's happened. Like quite a few folks from my company speak in African conferences. You don't have the internet connection there. So sometimes the things that you take as, okay, this is always going to be there, they just might not be. So take the unfamiliar, make sure you have a working mic, check if you need a clicker, make sure if you have videos on there, those they are actually working on the equipment you have available. So if you can do like a pre-run check, that helps calm your nerves down so much, and then you would just not be stuck. Um, right. So that's just how I think about it.
You think about it in a useful way, Varshi. You know, I was at a conference, I don't know, because it must be a few weeks ago now, and the presentations, my God, I mean, if if I was really tired, that was not the place to be because I was going to
Mhm.
fall asleep, and I
Yeah.
snore sometimes, so that was going to be embarrassing. I because every so many of the presenters reading the
Yeah.
slides, not looking at anybody, and I would
Yeah.
look around the audience to see what other people were doing, and
Mhm.
there were some people sleeping. Luckily, they weren't snoring, so that's good. But then
Yeah.
there's other people on their phones, other people on their laptops, and I just thought to myself, what was the point of this? Is it just the fact
Mhm.
that you just wanted to say that you presented at this conference, or do you actually want people to be engaged with what you're talking about, to actually
Mhm.
retain what you were talking about? It's just, man, it was a waste of time.
Yeah.
When's the snack time? That's what I started thinking after a while.
No, I've been in a few of those presentations as well, and watching other people speak at times also gives you an idea of how you can speak. Like sometimes I just watch TEDx presentations, or I watch the speakers that I really like, take notes. You should never be copying somebody's style entirely, because it would just not be natural or authentic to you, and people can tell quite easily if you're copying something. So be yourself, but observing how other people are approaching it can give you some ideas on how to get better as well.
Do you ever get nervous before giving a presentation? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
I always have get nervous before a presentation. I think what usually helps me is the practice. Before I give any presentation, I usually have practiced it at least 10 times or so. So by the time I'm there, it's just pretty much it's just pretty much a part of a routine. So it just goes by really fast, because I feel like I've done that before. I've seen that before. It's just not as nervous for me. I think one of the tips that now I don't feel as nervous, but initially one of the tips that somebody had given me is to find that one person in the audience that you can connect to and try looking at them, so that you don't feel as nervous. But now I don't do that as much.
Well, wow, 10 times, man. You said you like to plan. You weren't playing around. That's a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for being a guest, Varshi. How can people get in touch with you?
Yes, so people can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. So at Varshi Gupta there, just send me a request if you would like to get in touch. Um, we do have a public matrix account for Canonical too. So if you're interested, you can look at that as well. Just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll let you know how more ways to get involved.
Wonderful. Well, everyone, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. I work with technical professionals so they can present more effectively, especially in front of non-technical audiences. And you can learn more about that at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Varshi.
Thanks, Neil. Bye.